Hello everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a very basic sort of VTOL design and the concepts and basics behind VTOL. So the first thing we're going to do is make a very basic VTOL craft to understand how the basics are in Kerbal Space Program and how they, fit together. So we're going to get this, the Mark 1 cockpit, and we're going to put the fuel tank on the back, and we're going to put a advanced SAS module between it, like that. So let's assemble that. Next we're going to get a structural piece, and it's going to be the cubic octagonal strut. I'm going to stick that on the back, and then we're going to stick another one on the back. Then we're going to come to this one, and face on the top of it, about there, and then turn this down, like that. So we have a mount point for our engine. Then we want two more, and another fuel tank. This should guarantee us a good amount of flight time, just so we can practice our VTOLing. VTOLing, that's a thing now. Right, so let's get a basic jet engine. Now, the basic jet engine weighs 1 mass. Now, as you can see, we're balancing this along this point. So this and this, the cockpit weighs 1.25, I believe, and I believe the SAS weighs 0.1. So that is 1.26. Now this weighs 1, plus we need to add some wings on the back. Or you can use this, and this weighs 1.2, like that. Next we need to mount our engine. So we're going to go with a basic jet engine, because it makes the most sense right now, and I'll explain why. See, when we mount this in here, we're going to need allow part clipping for editors. But the reason we're using this engine is because as we mount it here, we're going to need space for our landing gear so that we can land easily. And it's quite a short engine, so it gives us a lot of ground clearance without sticking out too much. Now we're going to need an aerodynamic intake. This one is very good for building VTOLs because it has a point, and we'll need that point in a minute. So this is our design. Now, for next we need to route a fuel duct into the engine. This is because the cubic octagonal struts don't actually transfer fuel. Now it will add a bit more weight, but if you add 2 on each side, then it will just make sure the whole thing is balanced out. You could do 1, but just for simplicity we'll do it like that. And that's all we actually need for a VTOL. The wings and stuff can go afterwards, once we've already worked out that our design flies. So we're going to add a landing gear. In fact, we'll just use this sort of landing gear. We don't need wheels actually, because we're not going to be doing anything like that. So let's mount our landing gear like that. And I think that is everything we need. Yep. So now we're going to launch our spacecraft. Space plane. Plane. Helicopter. VTOL. Potato. Let's do this. So as you can see, our engine is on pretty much the center point of the craft. So we're going to assume this is going to work. It's along the middle, and it looks pretty much in the middle, right? So we're going to lower our landing gear. Yeah, they're only just useful. We're going to start up this engine. There we go. Don't have any lights, don't need brakes. Put your SAS on, and let's give this a try. So the thing about the jet engines, they're not the best things you can actually use for VTOLs because they have to spool up, which means they're not very controllable. On the other hand, something like a rocket engine would be much more controllable, but on the other hand, means you have to have extra fuel tanks, and their fuel doesn't last that long, and their rocket engines and Kerbals invented them. So they're probably not the best to use. So that's there, our VTOL is looking pretty okay. But we haven't actually checked if it's working correctly. Now, this is where this point comes in. Because instead of comparing the center of thrust, which is going to instantly change as soon as you put your engine on the back, you want to compare the center of mass to the point of the engine. As you can see, our center of mass is just back from the point of the engine. So we need a bit more weight up the front of the craft, obviously. So we can use this if we want to add extra features. Let's say if we wanted to add some lights to our craft or some landing gear, this would definitely be the best time to do it, because we need to add this weight to the front. So I'm going to add a cabin protector skid, like that. And as you see, it's a bit too forward now, so I'm going to move this back to about there. And the whole game is basically putting the point of this ball on top of the point of the intake. There we go, that's perfect. Now we just need some landing gear. Now we're going to go with proper landing gear this time, because they provide free electricity. Yep, the landing gear have their own lights inside them that have pretty much infinite electricity as far as I last checked. So I'm going to make sure these are lined up so that we take off correctly. And there we go. Finally we can add some wings. Now you want to go for the standard sort of center of mass is about where the center of lift is sort of procedure for the wings. You can find other tutorials for how to do planes like that. But there we go. I find this generally just works. See, our center of lift is quite far behind our center of mass, so we're going to add some winglets and try and pull it forward a bit. And this will provide you with this most stable craft you can possibly get. So, there we go. And what you will definitely need on a Vtol is the control surfaces. You will need a lot of control surfaces, because even though you're going up and your control surfaces can be useless, as soon as you start moving they're going to be extremely useful for keeping you where you want to be. So I use this one because it moves around a lot to provide a lot more control, unlike the Delta Deluxe winglet, which only has a little flap at the back. Control plane, however, whatever you want to call it, it's a thing. Also, if you want to add some structural support, you can go ahead and do that now. Although it is pretty much never necessary. So here we go, we're going to test out this Vtol now. And this is the very basic principle of a center-engine Vtol. The center of mass is directly over the middle engine. It's like balancing on a point. And this is why these are definitely the most controllable Vtols out of any design possible. Because you know that you're balancing on a point, so you can move in any direction you really want. For example, I'll demonstrate this in a minute, but if you have two engines on either side of the wing, and that's your Vtol, that works as well, but it limits your roll, because when you're trying to roll, you're pushing against one of the engine's thrust. And with this design, with the center, you're not pushing against anything's thrust, it's lifting you and you're balancing on it. Which is why I think it's a really stable design. As you see, there we go. We'll just tilt ourselves forward. See there, control planes coming into use, even though we're not really flying. And that's that simple. So here's a demonstration of the balancing on a point thing. See, we can do stuff like that. We can spin around. Now the tail generally keeps it in the right direction when spinning around, but you can fly backwards and stuff if you didn't have a tail. Like that. You can pull back, stop. Stuff like that. And then when you're ready, you can engage this engine. And if you've only got one engine on the back, you don't even have to use action groups. Another very interesting thing with the Vtols is, as I was talking about in the Ripper video, with this on, you don't need any lift from the wings. So you can go buck wild with whatever design you want. You don't even have to have wings to fly. As you see, that works really well. So now you have a Vtol that you can use for whatever you want. So, now I'm going to show you other sort of Vtol designs you can do. And now you get the basic premise of balancing on engines. You can sort of make your own Vtols, I guess. So here is a Vtol that I've made, and this is another one that balances on its own engines. But with this one I have two fuel tanks here. To balance that out, I've got two RCS tanks. Now when Vtols were originally designed, RCS was actually part of them. For example, if you go look up the Lunar Lander Trainer, that was a single-engined Vtol, just like this, balancing, that used RCS in order to stay up in the air. Nowadays we can vent the engines out of certain places, the engine gases, so that it's sort of RCS, but it's powered by the engine. So that's a lot better. But back in the day when Vtols were first around, RCS was actually on Vtols, and it's extremely useful even in the atmosphere, because you have these, and when you're hovering you get so much more control. So here's another Vtol, and this one I think, yes, this one uses two engines on either side. See, they're mounted under here. I've mounted them on these squares, because just so I can get them onto the wing. And once again, if you can see these two squares on the top, they are a direct line to this. Not the struts, but if you were to draw a line between there and there, that would be on the mark. So this is another balancing one. But as I was talking about earlier, rolling is restricted due to the fact that you're pushing against the engines. So I'll show you that now. Also, this is the sort of thing you would need action groups for, because it has multiple engines for each phase. So let's activate these engines and then throttle up. Let's put our brakes on and put our sassy on. And take off somewhat gently. This one also has RCS. And as you can see, when I try and roll, it's quite restricted to rolling. Also, this isn't a very good Vtol. As you can see, its roll is quite restricted, because that's what it's actually sitting on. But it does work. But generally, the more engines you have, the harder it is to roll. Also, because you're flying a much larger vehicle. So that's the basics of VTOL in Kerbal Space Program. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you definitely learned something, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to teach you cool things. And, well, I guess other things. I'll just stick to Kerbal Space. Anyway, see you soon for another video.